All right. Just one more minute to get started. We could have put some some fancy music, you know.
Next time. I have a climate playlist from Elko, Poland for that purpose, actually.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Next time.
All right, it's time then. So let's get started. Hi, how's it going, everyone? Good morning, good afternoon, good night. Welcome to the YOUNGO Open Conversation on Just Transition Advocacy. My name is Yusuke Sakai. I'll be your moderator today. I'm a co-contact point of the Just Transition working group together with Zuzanna Borowska that is present here today too. So,
Hello, that's me.
yeah.
Hi, guys.
Thank you, Zuzanna. So the reason that we wanted to make this conversation and why it's so important is the fact that we want is start on this request of how we can coordinate better and how we can cooperate inside the working groups inside of the YOUNGO network and how we can improve the advocacy process. Because at the end, advocacy is speaking on behalf and of the general youth public in our case. And I guess you already find yourself in a situation of writing a submission with few people. So we were thinking how we can really effectively write a submission, have a before, after a deep conversation in a topic, and really can gather a collective voice, right? So today, this conversation we are designed to improve this YOUNGO, a collective understanding on the just transition topic, and also hoping that this conversation can support a better advocacy and policy discussion for now on. So how we thought on doing this exercise. Today, we're gonna is a day of the open conversation to share those different understanding that we have today from the Just Transition Working Group, from the NDC Working Group, and from the Adaptation and Finance and Market. And right after, we're gonna open a 1 week consultation process, and you guys can develop further, ideas or comments on the consultation that we're gonna send by email to you. And finally, we will have a presentation and also a summary doc. And in our case of the Just Transition Work Program, we're gonna use it to provide inputs on our submission and hope that this doc can be also used by other working groups to improve the submissions, bilaterals, and advocacy strategy on the topic of just transition. So today's overall goal then, key message that we want you to have at the end of this session is to understand those different perspectives and also different work streams inside the UNFCCC that we can use to push the just transition advocacy. Also understand the actionable solutions and best practices. And this is particularly important because climate negotiators this year, they are really talking about how we can move to the discussion to action. So in this sense, actionable solution and best practices will be very important to us to try to find out inside our working groups. And finally, how young people are contributing and can contributing more to follow this agenda. So we're gonna have a speakers talk today. After, we're gonna have a breakout rooms so you guys can take out specific questions or doubts. And finally, we're gonna and also you will doing discussion in those breakout rooms. And after, we will have a final discussion to wrap up everything that we discussed today. So for today's conversation, we have a pleasure to have the special guest of today. First, we're gonna have Diksha from DC Working Group, and later on the Just Transition Working Program, we have the presence of Zuzanna and Marc. Zuzanna, the current, and Marc was former CP. And from the Adaptation Working Program, we have Ramírez. And finally, from Finance and Market, we have Mariana Guillaume. So I hope that this discussion will be very important since like inside the UNFCCC, the Just Transition is not discussed only on the Just Transition Work Program. And we have other workstream views that we want you to understand, for example, energy, adaptation, gender. So the conclusion is that we want to have you to have this broader and specific views. And NDC will be also very important because next year we're going to have a review of the NDCs, right? And then how we can introduce the just transition in this topic will be fundamental. So as our first guest to open this discussion, I wanted to invite Zuzanna and Marc to make your presentation from the perspective of the Just Transition Working Group. So the floor is yours, Zuzanna and Marc.
Yes, thank you. Should I share my screen? Yeah, okay, thanks. Let me just open this. Okay, these are the slides and share screen. And then slideshow. Yes, can everyone see my screen clearly?
Yes, Zu, we can.
Okay, thanks. That's awesome. So hello everyone again. My name is Zuzanna. As I already said, I'm a contact point of the Just Transition Working Group together with Yusuke, and I'm going to give you a first presentation, a first dive into Just Transition. So my part is going to be about a little introduction to Just Transition and the whole discussion around what it is, right? And then I'm going to try to explain to you what it means to the holistic approach to just transition, including a sustainable development perspective. And then after me, we'll have Marc, who will also speak a little bit about the more workforce perspective. So yeah, let's go into it, and let's try to answer first this most difficult, most exciting question. What is actually just transition? Let's see. So here a little slide with some different attempts to define what just transition is, but actually the first thing I want to say, and it's very important, is that there is no single universal definition of just transition, especially there is no universal definition in international law. And this is kind of a fundamental cause of why we have the problems with just transition in the UNFCCC, right? Because different people can have different understandings of it. And based on that, they can try to bring very different ideas, very different interests. And the discussion around defining the concept kind of goes on forever, and we can't move past that. And I'm not sure if we can resolve this right now, but definitely conversations like today can help. So yeah, and as you see here, different countries can understand it differently, but also different communities. So justice also is very important for different marginalized communities and affected communities, and they also have a different understanding. But from a kind of official point of view, probably the most widely known or accepted definition is the one by the ILO, so the International Labour Organization, which says just transition is greening the economy in a way that is as fair and inclusive as possible to everyone concerned, creating decent work opportunities and leaving no one behind. So it has a few elements, right? I just highlighted them for you so you can see fair and inclusive, decent work opportunities, leaving no one behind, which is kind of related to sustainable development, right? And here also my attempted definition, this actually comes from my bachelor thesis that I wrote very recently. I define just transition as a transformation of human economic systems away from fossil fuel-based economy towards more sustainable and climate-neutral economic systems in a manner that is just towards the societies affected by the transition. So for me, it's about transformation of the system, really, and the justice element the most. And then also, of course, just a brief comment about the UNFCCC work streams that are relevant to just transition. The most probably are the two listed here: response measures together with the Katowice Committee on the Impacts of Response Measures, or KCI in short. which have a more mitigation and labor focus, the workforce perspective, and then the Just Transition Work Program, which is a very recent thing, trying to look at the topic also from a more holistic or developmental perspective, discuss justice. And there's the term called, sorry, can someone mute your microphone? Yes, thank you. And the Just Transition Work Program discusses a term called Just Transition Pathways, which kind of speaks to the differentiation of how different countries and different groups can experience and understand just transition. So the next one is, like, as I'm giving the first presentation, I thought might be nice to bring in some questions first for you guys to think of. And you can see there's a lot of questions when we think about just transition, right? Is it only about the energy transition? Is it only about the workforce, or is it a broader concept? What does it focus on? Mitigation or adaptation, or can we include both of them? You know, is it about a system transformation or a system of different transitions, different just transition pathways? How do we achieve an ambitious system transformation and at the same time take into account different local contexts? How do we measure justice? Another interesting question, right? And how do we finance just transition? So who's going to pay for it? Who receives and who provides the money? What about the other means of support? And who should participate in a just transition and how? So hopefully, you know, the discussion here will also help us answer some of these questions, especially from a youth perspective. Yeah, and then kind of moving on to the holistic approach, as I called it. So first, I have here a quote from the IPCC, which said in its last report that prioritizing equity, climate justice, social justice, inclusion, and just transition processes can enable adaptation and ambitious mitigation actions and climate resilient development. So as you see, they speak about incorporating both mitigation and adaptation, and also these very much socially related terms such as climate justice, equity, social justice, right? And climate resilient development. So following this, kind of this thought arose of having a more multi-dimensional concept of just transition, also multi-sectoral, right? And here I have some examples of what just transition can actually include for different countries. So, you know, it can be energy, can be the labor market, education, agriculture and food systems, social protection, finance, technology, much, much more. Yeah, that's why we have the whole discussion here. And yeah, and that's basically the aspect of leaving no one behind, which relates to the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, right? And here is the dimension of trying to account for the needs of the global south. Because the countries of the global south, they are still in their phase of development, right? So they speak about the right to development. So this is this kind of paradox between, you know, letting them still continue their development pathways, but at the same time transition the system into a more climate neutral economic system. So this is the difficulty here. And also it's about poverty eradication, you know, in the process, and leaving no groups behind, right? So that nobody is left in poverty and without a stable life, basically. And finally, the very important aspect of justice and equity. So as I said, this is kind of the main element for me personally that is very important to be discussed in Just Transition. And the concept of justice, especially because it's actually not that much mentioned, for example, in the Just Transition work program. And I was recently at the UNEP conference in Nairobi, and they tried to talk about climate justice, didn't work out at all. But we have to bring this in, actually, right? Justice and equity between countries and also between social groups within those countries. And here I have a very nice image at the bottom that I really liked. So I just put it here so you can imagine a little bit those different concepts, right? So first we have here inequality, unequal access to opportunities, right? Very clear. But then we have equity. Okay, custom tools that identify and address inequality. So it's like this person has a different tool, this person has a different tool. They are tailored to their needs, right? Then equality is kind of using the same tools for everyone, but then does it really solve the problem? We see not, maybe not necessarily, right? But then justice, which is here shown kind of as the solution, which I also think I agree with, is about actually fixing the system so that it can offer equal access to both the tools and the opportunities. And that's it from my side. So I hope it wasn't too long. I hope you guys found some interesting insights. And we'll meet again soon in the breakout rooms. And now I'd like to give the floor to Marc, if he's here with us, to give a little presentation of the workforce perspective.
Hi,
Hi,
everyone.
Marc.
Hi, Zuzanna. Thank you.
Yay!
So I won't use slides, so maybe you will have to just hear me for a while.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I'm turning into not having slides. So yeah, so first of all, I'm Marc Ramírez. I'm from Spain, and I was the contact point of this working group last year. Many you guys know me from COP or from the emails or the WhatsApp chat. So yeah, so I'm working in the Spanish Youth Council, and I am personally a workers' representative, which means that I am the person who represents my fellow workers in front of our bosses. And I am also part of the trade union in general in Spain workers' commissions, in which we talk about many issues, mostly labor rights, but also referring to other things such as climate, which is important from the workers' perspective. So why is Just Transition a workforce thing? Because it mostly refers to mute yourself. Thanks. So the Just Transition, I mean, we understand that climate justice means that the countries that have historically been more responsible for the emissions have to be more responsible also for the climate action, which means CBDR, common but differential responsibilities, and also equity. But what does social justice means? Means that we, like our society, our whole world is divided mostly in two groups. Ones who have the power, ones who don't have the power, ones who own the wealth and who own the industries, and the others in which we don't have that power, and we don't own that land, we don't own the business. So that's the basic inequality that works, that rules our world between the employers and the employees. So how many, I want you guys to type in the chat, how many people in the world live on wages? If you can type it, I'm gonna say who's the winner. You can say it's in billions, okay? So just say the numbers. We are 8 billion people in the world. How many do you think that are workers, that are employees, that their livelihoods depend on employers? So Lina says 3 billion, 6.5, half 70%, 8 billion. 8 billion is everyone in the world. We don't count children, and we have a winner. So Rajan Kumarsa, it's 3.5. rate. So we have 3.5 billion, at least 3.5 people who are employees. So we are not counting people whose income depends on others, but are not directly employees. But people who are who depend their livelihoods on income, on wages, is 3.5 billion people. So we also know that the richest 1% contributes in greenhouse gas emissions as the same as the 66% poorest people, and only 100 companies contribute 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions. What does that mean? That we have to think that climate justice also means that we have to take into account social justice, and that we have to take into account who is more responsible, who owns the wealth. How do we do that? In terms of procedural justice, which means social dialogue. What the social dialogue means that the employers and the employees, we have to talk and agree, which are not only the conditions of the work, but also to think about how our economy works. So how do we do that? Uniting into a meeting the employers' organizations and the workers' organizations, which means the trade unions. And out of that, we get collective bargaining. So we have the climate negotiations at COP, but we also have working conditions negotiations in every single company in most countries. Not every country in the world has labor rights and freedom of organization, freedom of association, freedom of trade unions. So from the climate perspective, it is important that employees, that workers have the right to claim that labor rights within their company. Why do we say this in terms of climate? Because we need, as Zuzanna said, to transform the economy, but we have to do it with the working majority, not at our cost. So when we think about green jobs, we have to think about decent jobs, which means that when we take out fossil fuels from the equation, it means that people should not lose living conditions, working conditions. It should not be, it should not destroy the whole of the economies of some countries, but we should transform and create new jobs, decent jobs, and create rights perspectives, which mean also creating education and skills. Just transition plans, which means that have to include social dialogue across economic sectors, Zuzanna has said that, and also across urban and rural areas. What should YOUNGO care about in this perspective? First of all, when we are taking the discussion going on, first, think yourself as activists, but also rooted in your own social background. What is your own job? What is the place where you will work? What is the job of your parents, your siblings? How can climate policies impact in your own neighborhoods, in your cities, in your villages, in your towns? How can your own company, if you're working, how can your own company change the way you work, the providers, the materials that you use in your work to cope with the fossil fuels phase-out agenda? How can your sector, the institution you work on, can become more green and more decent? And the last point that I want to make, contest the profits, contest the wealth. Who is more wealthy, who is taking profits of your own work, and how can these profits because when we are polluting, when we are taking out the externalities, the negative effects of the economy in terms of pollution, in terms of GHG, how can this profit and this wealth be redistributed to climate action? And that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for those key inputs, Zuzanna and Marc. And now I really wanted to call to the floor Diksha from the NDC working group, please. Are you there?
Yes, thank you so much for the floor. Hi everyone, I'm Diksha, I'm from Nepal, and I'm representing NDC working group today, and we'll be speaking about the connection between NDC and Just Transition So let me begin. So there is a strong connection between the nationally determined contribution and just transition. We all know that what NDCs are. NDCs are essentially roadmaps that countries create under the Paris Agreement. These plans outline their goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and adapting to climate change impacts, while we just heard this transition focuses on making the transition to a low carbon economy fair and equitable for everyone. It aims to protect the workers in high carbon industries, create new green jobs, and ensure that no one is left behind. Further, why just transition matters for NDC? NDC and effective NDC need to consider the social aspect of climate action. Rapid shift to climate action, a rapid shift to clean energy, for example, could create job losses in the fossil fuel sectors. Just transition principle can help NDCs be more successful by smoothing the transitions, by retraining workers and providing social safety nets. Just transition can ease the impacts on communities reliant on high carbon industries. Also, why just transition matters for NDC is that it helps to build the public support. A fair transition is more likely to gain public support, public acceptance for ambitious climate goals. Also, it will unlock new opportunities by spurring innovations and creating green jobs in clean energy, sustainable infrastructures, and other sectors. Okay, more and more countries are now recognizing the connection between the just transition in NDCs. UNDP reports also suggest that 38% of recent NDCs now include reference to just transition principles. This is a positive trend, but there is still a room for improvement to ensure a truly just transition from all. Okay, so from the perspective of NDCs, just transition is about ensuring a fair and equitable shift towards a low carbon economy as outlined in the NDC goals. NDC recognize the climate action should not come at the expenses of people's livelihood. Rapid shift away from the fossil fuels could cause job losses and economic hardship to the communities that are reliant on these industries. If the just transition is integrated into NDCs, it will aim to protect vulnerable groups, workers workers in high carbon sectors, and ensure inclusive green transitions. NDC with just transition will include plans for reskilling and upskilling programs by equipping workers with the skills needed for green jobs in renewable and sustainable infrastructures and other emerging sectors. Also, it will provide support for workers who will lose their job during the transition, such as unemployment benefits and retraining programs. It will be more relevant to the countries like Nepal, where I belong to. Also, investing in communities that are high reliant on carbon industries to diversify their economies and create new opportunities. NDC recognize that just transition is crucial for gaining public acceptance for ambitious climate goals. People are more likely to support climate actions if they feel they won't be left behind, because the main aim of this transition is not leaving anyone behind. So NDCs also acknowledge NDC also acknowledge the international cooperations, and this is acknowledge the need for international support, particularly for the developing countries, because we all know that just transition is not going to happen overnight, and we need a lot of finances for that. So we need to support the countries, developing countries, like developing countries for during this process. Overall, NDC view just transition as a way to achieve climate goals in a way that is fair and equitable, by minimizing the negative social impacts of the transition, building public support for ambitious climate action, and creating new opportunities for sustainable future. Also, by integrating just transition principles, NDCs can ensure a smoother and more inclusive steps towards a low carbon economy for everyone. And this is it from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diksha, for giving those inputs about NDCs. This number that you mentioned about just 38% of the NDC refers to just transition. Is that right? Yeah. It shows, I guess, there's a lot of other rooms to put the just transition on other NDCs, so you can visit the NDC of your country, remembering that the NDC is a main instrument to make your country accountable. So with this being said, thank you so much, Diksha, for the intervention. And I wanted to call to the floor then Ramin from Adaptation Working Group of YOUNGO. Ramin, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you so much. Good morning, good evening, everybody. I am representing the Adaptation Working Group here, and it's a pleasure to be here on the panel with the other working groups as well. I just asked Suzuki to share my presentation so I can start.
Yeah. I guess your presentation is here. Can you see it?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot has been talked about the just transition already. So I'm not gonna waste too much time and bore you guys again with the definitions. I'm just gonna go a little bit more in explaining as Zuzanna has already defined just transition. So I'm just gonna go in the explanation. But before I do that, one interesting thing while I was researching on just transition was the concept, like where did just transition, this whole phenomenon, come from? So I found out that just transition actually originated from the labor movements, and it wasn't initially a climate thingy. So it came from the labor movements of the workers who used to campaign to moving away from the jobs that used to be in the environmentally hazardous industries, and that's how they wanted to transition from a more safer environment. And since then, it has now expanded in the climate change context to cover the communities who are impacted, reducing the emissions and all of that, as Zuzanna has already explained. So in order to tackle the environmental challenges, we need to move away from the fossil fuel based economy and move towards a more climate neutral and climate resilient economy. So one of the things that I really liked what she mentioned was Zuzanna mentioned was like how she explained the transformation of the human economic system away from the fossil fuel based economy towards a more sustainable economy. And that really is what's the crux of just transition, that we move away from the fossil fuel economy and move towards more climate neutral and low carbon economy. But then it also means that we, as the ILO's definition said that I've quoted, that we understand that there's a need for the transition, but there's also a need to make sure that we also give them alternative decent work opportunities and we don't leave anyone behind. So it can only be just in both of the capacities, as long as, yes, it's moving towards a resilient economy, but also making sure that the wages of the people, the livelihoods of the people, the work opportunities of the people are covered. Next slide. So as I just said, like just transition is not only about economy and not only about it's not only about economic systems, it's about people. So it's people centered. So how are they considered? What in what capacity are people considered in just transition, and it covers the rights of the people, the labor rights, also the trade unions, and how we are able to shift people from the economic system that they're engrossing right now towards a more sustainable economic system. And so what we need to do is this is a phenomenon that we need to move away from business as usual approach and move towards a climate resilient future, because business as usual approach has already done tremendous damage to the climate and to the environment in holistically, and now it's about time that we move away from that from business as usual approach and to go towards sustainable climate future. Next slide, please. So the urgency of the just transition for climate action is, first of all, that post-pandemic, we have a very good opportunity to build forth better, because then it gives us an opportunity to deal with it, to basically have a people-centered approach in tackling both climate as well as inequalities, because climate justice cannot happen without having a people-centered approach, because basically what we are fighting for is that we don't leave anyone behind, and it is all inclusive. So because I'm focusing on youth here, so the urgency of just transition is making sure and ensuring that the younger generations are not burdened with the consequences of unsustainable practices. So our generation now has a responsibility and opportunity to build better, to advocate better for the generations to come, for the consequences of unsustainable practices that they might be suffering from. So fairness and justice, as I said, climate justice, it demands that the costs and benefits of the environmental decisions are distributed equitably across generations, and they are not burdened. Next slide. So here I'd like to make a link, an interlinkage between just transition and climate adaptation. So as I mentioned earlier, that moving away from a fossil fuel-based economy is absolutely ambitious and promising, yes. But the thing is that it will also require a lot of sectors of the economy to shrink. And in the consequence of that, in the aftermath of that, a lot of people, including the youth and other generations, would also be losing their jobs. So climate change affects everyone, but it's not going to impact everyone equally. And here I'd also like to introduce the Global South perspective, as Zuzanna also mentioned in her presentation, because I come from a Global South country, and Global South has had a very different development pathway than Global North. And well, I know it. I'm not sure what your comment would be on that, but I also believe in the fact that Global North has historically been the biggest contributor to the climate crisis that we are facing right now. And with the Global South, people of Global South, all the NGOs and the advocacy that we do, we demand reparations from the Global North to help the developing countries to at least move away from the crisis, first of all, and secondly, to help us develop at least to the point where we are looking at the just transition. You see, Global North has developed enough in terms of infrastructures and industries and economies that they can now think at, okay, this is also an alternative that we can consider just transition. Global South has not even reached there. So to impose this thing on Global South is a little unfair. So first we need to support the Global South to at least reach to the point where we think that, okay, our needs are covered, our main needs are covered, our people are covered, our livelihoods are covered. Now we can think of an alternative. We are way, way behind now, right now, in terms of talking about the Global South as a whole region. So yeah, so what we need to look at right now is, if we're talking about Global South or Global North, both, the adaptive capacity that the economy has, the different sectors of the economy and the communities. So as I said, that climate change is not impacting all the sectors and all the communities equally. So we need to look at the adaptive capacity in different sectors as well as communities, particularly marginalized communities. That includes youth, that includes women, that includes indigenous communities, all in sundry. As well as we need to look at the distributional impacts of climate change along with the adaptive capacity. Next slide, please. Okay, so the challenges and opportunities when we are talking about making that just transition is, the first is that we need to upskill, reskill the youth for the effective participation in green policy making, because of course, if you're literally shifting from one system to another, you need people who can make policies, you need people who have that toolkit in their human capital. so that they are fit for that system that you are now shifting to. So that's one of the things that we need to focus on. The governments need to focus on, the development partners need to focus on, that the youth are upskilled and reskilled according to the needs and demands of the new just transition system. Then we have that to shift towards more environmentally sustainable economies by reviewing development policies. So this is again another thing, a call to action for the governments to review the development policies and align them with the green economy and low carbon economy systems. Then the government should promote equal access to skilling and learning from green jobs that are coherent with environmental policies. So the whole thing that we are pushing for is for the system, to economic systems, to be environmentally sustainable, to be climate resilient. So the government has to push towards jobs and make policies that are in line with the environmental sustainability. Then we have to improve access and opportunities for green skills and acquisition, as well as recognition for the marginalized youth. So we have talked about upskilling and reskilling of youth, and we've talked about push for the green jobs. But what we need to do is that we also need a recognition for the marginalized youth. That includes I would say, like, okay, sorry, I got it confused with the time. Okay, I'll just wrap it up now. So that includes including the youth in the policy making, as well as the people who cannot be represented, maybe who don't have a seat at the table right now. They need to have a voice. So we need to represent the people, not only just the youth, the people, the marginalized communities, to bring their voices at the table, at the policy making and governance structures. Next slide. So some of the recommendations, general recommendations, are supporting the green jobs revolution, but also keeping in mind that now that we're shifting to a green economy or just transition, we need to have safety protections, health benefits, wages, living wages, and alternative decent job economic opportunities for the people who are right now in fossil fuel sectors. Then we have the government needs to build a public support for this, because of course it's going to be a lot of hue and cry maybe for the people who might lose their job as a consequence. So the public needs to be on the same board as the government, along with the other stakeholders. Then we have that we need local solutions and apply a just transition lens to climate action. And we also need urgency for concerted efforts to combat climate change. And I'm just going to conclude now. Just next slide. So conclusion is that the success of just transition depends on the participatory engagement of all of the stakeholders, including the youth, marginalized communities, and women, and all of them, all the genders. Then we have that it'll only be successful if young people are engaged in every stage of the just transition, because it's going to impact us the most, from agenda setting to implementation and monitoring. And one of the key components and pillars of the just transition is that no one is left behind. So that, though I had a lot more to talk about, I'm sorry that if I exceeded my time limit, because I got a little too passionate talking about it. But yeah, that's a wrap. Next slide is last slide. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ramin. And I guess you brought a lot of information from equitable allocation of burden to between global north and global south to reach the basic needs. And it's interesting, the base to reach basic needs. So like it means actually all, affordable renewable energy, governance, gender gap. This is all inside the Agenda 2030. So it really like shows the way that the just transition is also about, putting the SDG and climate action together and deliver to the world. You talk about the youth. Youth needs to be this better future, and etc. And now and all of this must come with money, right? So to finish this discussion, I really wanted to call then Maria Guillaume to talk about just transition and finance perspective before our breakout rooms discussion, where Rahim, you can develop more your ideas. So Maria Guillaume, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone. So let me know when you can see my screen. Wait, so I'm Marina, I'm from Brazil, and I'm part of the climate finance working group. So can you see my screen?
Yes,
sorry,
you can.
Share.
I guess you can.
Present.
Yes, exactly.
Present full screen. Okay, so yeah, we'll talk a bit about Thank you for everyone that already presented. They were really amazing presentations. So now we'll talk a bit about the intersection between just transition and climate finance. And first, just wanted to say thank you for Jody, our CP for finance. She did this amazing presentation, and I will just do the easy/difficult part to present it to you. So yeah, if you have any doubts, if I'm speaking too fast, you can just let me know. I'll try to cover everything in the short time that we have. So we can start saying that just transition is a 500 trillion finance challenge, because according to the Financial Stability Board, the global financial system holds nearly 500 trillion assets under management, and this includes assets combined in commercial banks and central banks, insurance firms, institutional investors, public financial institutions, and municipal finance. So for us to complete a just transition, we need to make sure that every finance decision will be in line and will take people as well as climate into account. So even though we are seeing the first signs of financial system action in the just transition, they are very insufficient, mostly in speed, scale, and depth. So to accelerate the global transition to a resilient, net zero, and nature positive economy in a socially inclusive and fair way, we need to make sure that we use the power of finance and that the necessary significant shift in the direction of the money happens, because the money needs to go in the right direction. So we guarantee a just transition. And we see that we have a lot of money going on. So at COP28, governments recognize that 2024 will be the year when breakthroughs are required. So this year, the main topic in the climate negotiations is deciding the new collective quantified goal for climate finance. And the entire financial system needs to be transformed. And from a just transition perspective, this transformation needs to include and be interlinked in three main factors. The first one is climate alignment of the system. And the Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement states that we need to make finance flows consistent with a pathway to low greenhouse and climate resilient development. And this means, from a just transition perspective, that the financial system needs to finance actions that will not only tackle climate alignment and not only tackle low greenhouse gas emissions, but also the existing social issues, including ending poverty, including reducing inequality, creating decent work, so the entire financial system can be aligned with positive social and climate outcomes. The second point from a social justice perspective is that access to finance is essential for sustainable development and a key feature when we think about just transition, not least because both achieving net zero and building a climate resilient acquire upfront investments and posing challenges in terms of access to finance, access to capital. But beyond access to capital, we need to think that social justice dimension is mainly a systemic dimension. So the system transformation means ensuring that every financial decision, as I said before, will take people as well as climate into account. It's not only about individuals, it's about the entire system being built in a way that we allow this transformation to happen in a climate resilient way. And in 2024, we had a study that found out that the majority of the world's 400 largest financial institutions do not acknowledge their impact in the environment and society. So we have the largest financial institutions not taking this social justice into account. The third point, it's global inclusion. And as the IPCC said, climate finance in support of a just transition is likely to be key to a successful low carbon transition globally. And that means that investments need to be reallocated from the global north to the global south, and this needs to happen soon. So it's important for us to remember that developed countries did not meet the 100 billion goals yet. Even though they said that they met in the last 2 years, we have a reporting gap. So we are not sure if that goal was met yet. And this costs a lot of trust in the negotiation between developing and developed countries. So looking ahead, emerging and developing countries, excluding China, will need at least 2.4 trillion a year to invest in nature and climate resilient development. And at least 1 trillion needs to come from external public and private flows. So all of these needs to be aligned with the Just Transition principles, because it will require to increase like a dedicated focus on Just Transition funding. So the new collective quantified goal, the famous NCQD, needs to be good both in quantity and also in quality, because a lot of money is needed, like 2.14 trillion, it's a lot, but this needs to be flown and reallocated in the right direction, from carbon intensive sectors to sectors that promote climate mitigation and adaptation. But this is not happening. Finance has not been flowing. Why that? We can say that Just Transition is not yet in mainstream decisions. So short-term profit is still guiding all decisions in financial institutions. And we need to advocate and work with financial institutions to make sure that a Just Transition and social considerations is part of the decision-making process. And I'll talk a bit about this when a bit later. And a second point that is really important is there is a bit uncertainty over what goods look like and disagreement on justice. So we need to establish effective metrics and indicators. So we measure performance across financial system on Just Transition. What is just and Just Transition? What does that mean concretely? As an example on how to address this, in the Finance and Markets Working Group, we submitted a policy brief to T20, where we develop a framework to place intergenerational equity in the center of the international financial architecture reforms. There's the IFA reform. And we acknowledge that our system supports short-term profits over long-term economic, social, and environmental benefits that come with intergenerational justice. And however, even with this slow progress, we can also realize that the intergenerational principle is very new. So financial institutions still lack checklists, guidelines, and measurement policies. And this means that if we don't have concrete measurement, we will not be able to measure that. So we develop a framework of questions to guide financial institutions in integrating intergenerational thinking into their operations and decisions. Sorry, I don't know if I'm speaking too fast. I'm just trying to stay in the time. So I'll continue. Going back to our point, until we have collective agreement on what just looks like, we'll not be able to guide Just Transition. Third point on inadequate policies and rules and incentives to drive action. As YOUNGO, we need to work with the necessary policy institutions to make sure and advocate for like real economy and financial system transformation. So as an example, and I know we had like amazing best practice on that last year, and I hope we can continue this during this year, is that like our working groups need to work collectively. So I'm from the finance working group, but also I'm joining the Just Transition working group now. And I think it's really important that we advocate together. So our policies and our advocacy strategies are interlinked, because everything is basically interlinked. And as an objective, I would say we need to see Just Transition and finance goals built into the next rounds of the NDCs. And as a fourth thing, we have insufficient real-world leadership to raise the bar. So we need to identify best case studies and amplify them to demonstrate that the Just Transition needs to be financed. And if we don't have the money, we'll not be able to do it. And short-term profits is still more important than intergenerational benefits. So we need to call on reforms on the global financial architecture to even rethink what profit means, what revenue means, what asset means, what capital means for our generation and also for the next generations. And as a final slide, how can Just Transition and finance work together in the UNFCCC process? So Just Transition remains a very complex element in the UNFCCC process, as well as finance. And justice means different things to different people and communities. And often conflicts arise not between just or unjust solutions, but what people consider just. And as an observer, YOUNGO can push for intergenerational oriented perspectives that will help close this gap. Speaking about specific finance topics that I think it's important to interlink with the Just Transition is that this year, our main focus in finance will be the NCKG that I spoke a bit, Article 2.1c, and the Standing Committee on Finance related discussions. And the NCKG is a fundamental matter of justice because it will basically set the next climate finance goal provided by the Global North to the Global South by year. And we need quantitative sub-goals and also qualitative indicators to make sure an ambitious and reachable goal. Sorry, we cannot have a political number that is never reached. And people just say, oh, they were 100 billion, they were 100 billion, they were 100 billion, but that's never reached. This cannot happen. And also about Article 2.1c, recalling what that means is that we need to make finance flows consistent with a pathway to low greenhouse gas and climate resilient development. And without a just transition focus, this shift in the finance flows would just perpetuate more injustice. And once I heard from a Brazilian negotiator that from some countries in the global north, we could reach 100% of renewable energy sources, but still have not universal access to energy, and they would be satisfied. And we cannot accept that. So both financial and energy system needs to be aligned with principles of justice, or this would not reach climate justice ever. And about the Standing Committee on Finance, the community is currently focused on gender responsive finance, and gender is one pillar of the Just Transition work program when it comes to community and equity. So that's also like another thing we can work together and interlink. And to wrap up, to operationalize the Just Transition work program, we need to make sure it's funded. And in the finance agenda, we also need to take into account Just Transition angle. And what YOUNGO should advocate for, it's approaching this intergenerational equity perspective to bring together differences among global north / global south divide on what justice looks like. So thank you very much. And if you want to learn more about the Finance and Markets Working Group, you can reach out to me or in this link.
Thank you so much, Marina. And there's also a lot of information and all those frameworks about how to incorporate intergenerational equity on finance and economic system. After, I guess, for the participants, all those informations about, Marina mentioned about the submissions and the slides will be provided on your email. So don't worry, all right? So, ladies and gentlemen, we did it. We did the speakers time. So the first time is over. And now we are going to move to the second time that is also exciting, that is going to be about the discussions on the breakout rooms. But I know that you guys are very, very kind of tired, and we spent already 1 hour. So what I'm going to do right now with you is to make a little pause, and just to relax our minds. I know that there were a lot of informations. I hope that you are listening now. The beautiful sound of water. So let's take a 5-minute break. I guess this is also important for our mind health, right? So I wanted to really invite you all to a little meditation exercise. So ladies and gentlemen.
And in the meantime, I will make the breakout rooms.
Yeah, I know, I already made it, Zuzanna. But you can
What?
make, yeah, you can make another one and already allocate the note takers and speakers.
I don't see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I will open the breakout rooms. Just a sec. Good. So, note takers and dear speakers, you guys can enter the breakout rooms, okay? And the rest of you, in this 4 minutes, I will invite you to look somewhere, not the computer, preferably like somewhere far. And now you're gonna close the eyes, and you're gonna take 3 seconds to breathe in. And 3 seconds to breathe out. and you can close your eyes, and then you're going to repeat 3 seconds to breathe in. And out. And in. And out. And you can just relax and try to be aware of your heartbeat, of it if your skin is feeling cold or warm. Try to feel the ambience. And for instance, let all the thoughts flows in and flows out without holding no thoughts on your mind. Yes. We take care of our planet, and it's nice to have YOUNGO as a space for young people to take care of each other, right? And slowly now you can open your eyes. And organize slow by slow your thoughts and reconnecting to the reality around you. Perfect, guys. So meditation session, it's over. But I hope that you guys can relax a little bit, because now we're going to have another moment of the breakout sessions. So that will be very, very also important, since it's a moment that you guys can take, specific question to the speakers, and you will be discussing based on the three guiding questions about what is the youth contributions, what are the barriers and challenges, and how you see the just transition in practice, in your reality, and how we can promote actionable solutions and best practices. So the breakout rooms are already ready. You can click on the 3 dots of your Zoom link, and you can go to the breakout rooms, and you can choose the topic that you may get more interested on. And please remember to try to equilibrate the proportion of the breakout rooms, okay? And for the speakers, you guys can enter your breakout rooms, and the note takers also.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say one thing, because I see already so many people in our breakout room. I'm just gonna ask people to please have a look so that the participation is more balanced. So, you can move to another one as well. But you're welcome to join the Just Transition working group if you want to continue the discussion. And I mean, yeah, doesn't mean everyone has to leave, okay? Yeah. I'm coming there.
All right.
I'm coming there now, so see you guys.
All right. So it's 30 minutes. 30 minutes. We come back in 30 minutes. All right, guys. Breakout rooms moment. Go to your breakout rooms. Breakout rooms. Breakout rooms. Breakout rooms. Yoga coach. Carl, you can go, Carl. Your breakout room. Please. You don't see the breakout rooms? You can go to the three dots and you can access, yeah. It would be nice if you go to finance or NDC or adaptation. No? Okay. Yeah, you got it, Luis? Oui? Yes? No? Which one you want to go, guys? No, still no. Okay, Luis, I'm gonna assign you which one you want to go to, finance, adaptation, NDC. Adaptation. All right, moving you to adaptation. All right, guys. Yes, unfortunately, no energy, but go in some of the topics. Maybe on NDC would be interesting, and you can discuss, bring the energy on the conversation, okay? Fisayo, please. Hello. So I will ask everyone to go to one of the breakout rooms. We are having discussion over there, okay? So please join in some breakout rooms.
We're gonna have oh yeah, hi Yusuke, thanks for the recording. So we're gonna have this exercise here in front of you on the screen. You have this thing called Padlet, and we also shared the link with you in the chat. So please click on this link to join this, and then you'll be able to work on this to add some. Can you, Yunfan, can you show how to add something on the? Yes.
Okay, this is like the topic, and then this is what you want to say, or maybe like you can add comments below.
Maybe I can share the screen because mine is in English. Will it help? I don't know.
Maybe that do help.
Yeah.
Maybe it's interesting to share the link on the chat.
Yeah, it is there.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Okay, so yes. So here, guys, when you can go on this link here. All right, we shared this on.
And later we have to present it